My son wrote me an SMS. "Disappear, old man. My wife can't stand your presence." I just smiled, knowing their betrayal wouldn't go unpunished. The next morning, they became homeless bankrupts, and I vanished from their lives forever. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Ralph Coleman. I'm 67 years old, living in Sarasota, Florida. Spent 38 years in commercial real estate management before retiring, built a solid portfolio of 7 rental properties. Always thought I was smart about people, about reading situations. Turns out I was blind where it mattered most. The house at 1847 Magnolia Drive isn't much to look at from the outside, just another colonial-style home in a quiet Sarasota neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, manicured lawn, 2-car garage. I bought it in 2000 alt for $425,000. Watched it appreciate to $680,000 over the years. But the real value? That's what I thought I'd built inside those walls. A home for my family. My son Trey wasn't always like this. I remember him at 8 years old, running to meet me when I'd come home from property inspections, asking 1,000 questions about buildings and investments. Smart kid, curious, kind even. Somewhere between that boy and the 38-year-old man living in my house rent-free, something shifted, or maybe someone shifted him. Rachel entered our lives 5 years ago at a barbecue. Trey brought her home, and I'll admit, she was stunning. Blonde, polished, the kind of smile that could sell ice to penguins. But I've been in real estate long enough to know when someone's appraising property versus appreciating a home. Rachel looked at my house the way investors look at teardowns, calculating potential, not value. They married 6 months later. Small ceremony, which Rachel insisted was intimate and meaningful. Translation, she didn't want to spend money on a wedding when she could spend it on other things. My things, as it turned out. The first year, they rented a cramped apartment across town. Then Rachel got pregnant, or said she did. The pregnancy lasted exactly 3 weeks, just long enough for Trey to ask if they could temporarily move into my house, just until they got on their feet financially. I said yes. The baby disappeared in a convenient early miscarriage, but Trey and Rachel never left. 5 years. 5 years of watching my son transform into someone I barely recognized. Rachel worked her magic slowly, like water eroding stone. Little comments at dinner. "Trey, your father still uses a flip phone? How embarrassing." Longer observations during family gatherings. "Ralph, maybe you should think about assisted living. This house is too much for someone your age." The cruelest jabs came wrapped in concern. "We worry about you being alone, Ralph. What if you fall and no one finds you?" Meanwhile, they treated my home like a hotel with a particularly negligent staff. Dishes piled in the sink. Expensive groceries I'd bought disappearing into Rachel's Instagram food photos. She called herself a lifestyle influencer with 12,000 followers who seemed equally unimpressed with her content. Her laptop sat on my dining room table 18 hours a day, cluttering what used to be where I'd eat breakfast and read the newspaper. Trey managed a car dealership, pulling in maybe $52,000 a year. Rachel's influencer income, perhaps $18,000 if we're being generous. Yet they drove a $32,000 Audi Q5, wore designer clothes, took weekend trips to Miami. I'm no mathematician, but those numbers didn't add up, unless you factored in the $3,200 monthly rent. They weren't paying me, plus utilities, plus groceries, plus the various loans Trey would ask for and never mention again. The comments got sharper over time. Rachel stopped pretending to whisper. "Old people always smell weird," she told Trey one morning when I walked into the kitchen. I was standing right there. She looked directly at me, smiled, and poured herself coffee from the pot I'd brewed. My coffee. My kitchen. 6 months ago, something changed for me, too. I met Cynthia at a community chess tournament. Yes, people my age still have social lives, despite what Rachel implied. Cynthia was 61, a retired librarian with warm eyes and an actual sense of humor. We started having coffee, then dinner, then regular Friday evenings playing chess and talking about books, travel, life. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as an ATM machine or an obstacle, but as a person. I mentioned Cynthia casually one evening. Rachel's face transformed. "You're dating?" She said it like I'd announced plans to join a biker gang. "At your age?" "I'm 67, Rachel, not deceased." She exchanged a look with Trey, one of those married couple telepathy moments that used to make me happy for them. Now it just looked like conspiracy. 2 weeks passed. I decided it was time for them to meet Cynthia properly. That morning I told them I'd like to have her over for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just the four of us getting acquainted. Rachel's reaction was immediate and volcanic. She stood up from the couch so fast her laptop nearly crashed to the floor. "Absolutely not." "I'm sorry?" "This is our home, Ralph." "Our home." "Not my home," which it legally was. "Our home." "I'm not comfortable with strangers here." "Cynthia's not a stranger. She's someone important to me." "She's some woman you barely know, and you want to parade her through here like we're supposed to smile and approve?" Rachel's voice climbed octaves. "I have a say in who comes into my house." Trey sat there, silent, looking at his phone. My son, who used to defend me on the playground, now couldn't meet my eyes. "Trey?" I kept my voice level. "You have thoughts on this?" He glanced at Rachel, then at me. "Dad, maybe Rachel's right. It's kinda sudden, you know? We barely adjusted to you dating, and now you want to bring her here?" "I've known Cynthia for 6 months. You brought Rachel home after 3 weeks." "That was different," Rachel snapped. Trey wasn't some lonely old man trying to replace his dead wife. The room went silent. Even Trey looked shocked. I stood up slowly, picked up my car keys from the counter. "I'll be out this evening. You two can have the house to yourselves, as usual." I left. Spent the evening with Cynthia, told her what happened. She listened, held my hand, told me I deserved better. I agreed, but I wasn't sure what to do about it yet. That night, I came home around 10 p.m. The house was dark, except for the TV flickering in the living room. I went to my workshop in the garage, a small space where I restored antique clocks, one of the few hobbies Rachel hadn't mocked yet. I was examining the 1920s mantel clock when my phone buzzed. A text message from Trey. I opened it, and the words hit like a physical blow. "Disappear, old man. My wife can't stand having you around." I sat there in the dim light of my workshop, surrounded by ticking clocks and the smell of machine oil, staring at those words. My son, my only child, telling me to disappear from my own home. I read it 3 times. Then I smiled. I set my phone down on the workbench, still smiling. Not from happiness, from recognition. The feeling you get when a complex mechanism finally clicks into place and you understand exactly how it works. Around me, 17 clocks ticked in overlapping rhythms. Some people find the sound maddening. I find it clarifying. Each tick is a second passing, irretrievable, precious. I'd wasted 1,825 days, 5 years, trying to be understanding, trying to be the good father who didn't make waves, trying to believe my son would remember who raised him. The text glowed on my screen. "Disappear, old man." I thought about the hours I'd spent teaching Trey to ride a bike in front of this very house. He was 7, determined but terrified, kept insisting he could do it, then freezing when I let go of the seat. We spent 3 weekends on it before he finally found his balance. When he did, he rode in circles around the driveway, laughing, shouting, "Dad, look! Dad, watch this!" I'd watched. I'd always watched. When his mother died, Trey was 19. I held him while he sobbed in this garage, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of sawdust. "I don't know how to do this without her," he'd said. I told him we'd figure it out together, and we had for a while. I put him through community college, co-signed his first car loan, gave him a job managing one of my rental properties until he found something better. The night he proposed to Rachel, he called me first. "Dad, I think she's the one." He was so excited he could barely speak clearly. I drove to their apartment with a bottle of champagne I'd been saving. We toasted to his future, to happiness, to love. That was 4 years ago. The man who sent tonight's text wasn't the same person who'd made that call. I picked up my phone again and looked at the message. Rachel had done this. I had no illusions about that. But Trey had typed it. Trey had pressed send. At some point, you can't blame the puppet master when the puppet has hands of its own. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to Gerald Mitchell. Attorney, estate planning specialist, someone I'd worked with for 15 years on property transactions. We weren't friends exactly, but we had professional respect. I'd never needed him for anything personal before. It was 10:47 p.m. Too late to call. I sent a text instead. Gerald, need to schedule an appointment. Estate matters. Some urgency. Available this week? The response came back in 3 minutes. Tomorrow, 2 p.m.? My office? Perfect. I put the phone away and returned to the clock on my workbench. A 1924 Sessions mantel clock, black enamel case with brass fittings. Someone had wound it too tightly years ago, snapped the mainspring. People always think more force means better results. They don't understand that these mechanisms require precision, patience, the right amount of pressure at the right time. I'd been working on this clock for 2 months, slowly sourcing parts, carefully filing and fitting each piece. Now I installed the new mainspring, wound it properly, set the escapement. The clock began to tick. Steady, reliable, inevitable. Just like a good plan. 3 years ago, after Rachel made her first comment about assisted living, I'd started preparing. Not because I expected this exact moment, but because I understood pattern recognition. I saw where things were heading. Small disrespects become larger ones. Entitlement grows. And I'd been in enough business negotiations to know, when someone shows you who they are, believe them and prepare accordingly. That preparation meant visiting Gerald's office for what I'd called routine estate updates, updating my living trust, ensuring all property deeds were absolutely clear about ownership, getting specific documents notarized, creating paper trails, nothing dramatic, nothing Rachel and Trey would notice, because they never asked about these things. They just assumed. Assumption is a beautiful vulnerability in an opponent. I locked up the workshop and went inside. The house was silent now. Trey and Rachel had gone to bed in what used to be the guest room, the room they'd moved into, temporarily, 60 months ago. I walked past their closed door to my own bedroom, the smallest one in the house. I'd given them the master suite when Rachel complained about inadequate closet space. Sitting on my bed, I opened my laptop and started reviewing documents I'd stored in a secure cloud folder. Property deed for 1847 Magnolia Drive. Ralph Coleman, sole owner. Utility bills for 5 years. Ralph Coleman, sole payer. Tax assessments. Ralph Coleman, sole taxpayer. Insurance policies. Ralph Coleman, sole beneficiary. Their names appeared nowhere on anything that mattered. The next morning arrived cold and clear, one of those Florida February days where the temperature drops into the 50s and everyone acts like it's a blizzard. I was up at 6 a.m., made coffee, sat in my kitchen waiting. Trey emerged at 7:30 looking haggard. He saw me, started to speak, then stopped. "Sleep well?" I asked, my voice pleasant. "Dad, about last night, nothing to discuss. You were very clear in your message. Rachel was upset. I was upset. Maybe I overreacted. You told me to disappear. I'm working on that." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I have errands today. You two have the house to yourselves." I stood up, rinsed my coffee cup. "Enjoy it." I left him standing there, confused. Good. Confusion is the first crack in certainty. Gerald's office occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown Sarasota building, all glass windows and leather furniture. He met me in the conference room, closing the door behind us. At 54, Gerald had the look of someone who'd seen every variation of family drama and stopped being surprised years ago. "Ralph, it's been a while. 3 years since we updated everything. I remember. You were very thorough." He set a folder on the table. "What's changed?" "My son sent me a text message last night, telling me to disappear from my own home. He and his wife have been living there rent-free for 5 years. I'd like to discuss my options." Gerald opened the folder, revealing documents I recognized, copies of everything we'd prepared during those earlier visits. "You saw this coming." "I saw the possibility. Now it's a probability." "What outcome are you looking for?" "Justice," I said. "They want me gone? I'll be gone. But they'll learn what having me gone actually costs." Gerald smiled slightly. Not happy, just knowing. "Then let's begin." We spent 2 hours reviewing everything, the living trust that gave me absolute control over my assets, The power of attorney documents that meant nothing without my explicit authorization. The property deed that proved sole ownership. The financial records showing 5 years of their expenses paid by me. When we finished, Gerald leaned back in his chair. This is airtight, Ralph. Legally, you can proceed whenever you're ready. But I have to ask, you're certain? This is your son. My son told me to disappear. I'm granting his wish. When do we start? I checked my watch. It was 4:17 p.m. Tomorrow morning, draft the notice. I want it delivered by courier to the house by noon. Gerald nodded, already making notes. Consider it done. I drove home as the sun set over Sarasota Bay, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Beautiful, peaceful, the kind of evening that used to make me grateful for everything I'd built. Now it just made me determined to protect it. That night, I worked in my garage workshop until midnight, but I wasn't restoring clocks. I was planning, step by step, piece by piece, fitting each component into place with the precision of a watchmaker. By the time I finished, I knew exactly how this would unfold. The timeline, the legal moves, the pressure points. I'd spent 38 years in real estate, learning how deals worked, how leverage functioned, how timing meant everything. Rachel and Trey thought they were secure. They thought my kindness was weakness. My patience was fear. My age was vulnerability. They were about to learn that the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who reacts emotionally. It's the one who plans carefully, acts precisely, and understands that real power doesn't announce itself. It just executes. I looked at my phone one last time before bed. Trey's text still sat there. Disappear, old man. I deleted it. I didn't need the reminder anymore. Tomorrow, everything would change. The clocks were ticking, the mechanism was set, and the countdown had begun. They wanted me gone? Fine. But when I disappeared, so would everything they'd taken for granted. The courier arrived exactly at noon the next day, just as I'd instructed. I wasn't there to see it, of course. I was sitting in Cynthia's living room, drinking tea and playing chess, my phone on silent beside the board, but I could picture it perfectly. The knock on the door, Trey answering in his weekend sweatpants, signing for the envelope without reading the return address. My phone buzzed at 12:14 p.m., then again at 12:15, and 12:16. By 12:20, I had 7 missed calls from Trey and 3 from Rachel. I moved my bishop to threaten Cynthia's queen and took another sip of tea. You're not going to answer that? Cynthia asked, nodding toward my phone. No point. They're not calling to talk. They're calling to yell. What did the letter say? The truth, that they have 30 days to either start paying market rent, $3,200 a month, or vacate the property. Cynthia studied me over her reading glasses, and they can't afford that. Their combined income is about $70,000 a year, pre-tax. After their car payments, credit cards, and lifestyle expenses, they're spending roughly $4,500 monthly. Add $3,200 in rent? I smiled. The math doesn't work. It never did. The only reason they've been living this well is because I've been subsidizing it. So what happens when they realize they can't pay? Then they learn what accountability feels like. By evening, I had 23 missed calls. I finally answered on the 24th, Trey's voice exploding through the speaker before I could say hello. Are you serious right now? Are you actually serious? I assume you received the notice from my attorney. This is insane. You can't just kick us out. This is our home. Actually, Trey, I can. And it's my home. My name is on the deed. My money paid the mortgage. You've contributed exactly nothing to ownership. We've been living here for 5 years. That has to count for something. It counts for $192,000 in free rent, utilities, and expenses. Consider it an extended gift, one that's now concluded. Rachel's voice cut in from the background. Let me talk to him. There was a scuffle, then she was on the line, her voice dripping venom. This is about that woman, isn't it? You're trying to clear us out so you can move your little girlfriend in. This is about respect, Rachel, or the lack thereof. You want to talk about respect? You spring this on us with a lawyer's letter, like we're strangers? You are strangers. We live in the same house, but haven't had a real conversation in 2 years. You've made it very clear I'm an inconvenience in your life, so I'm removing the inconvenience. Me. By making us homeless? By requiring you to pay for housing like every other adult in America. The rent I'm asking is exactly market rate, actually $200 below what comparable properties charge. If you think that's unreasonable, you're welcome to check listings online. I could hear her breathing, sharp and angry. Then, we're not paying. That's your choice. The 30-day notice period begins today. If you haven't started payment or moved out by the deadline, I'll file for formal eviction. Check Florida Statute 83.56 if you'd like the details. I hung up before she could respond. The next morning, I started packing. Not everything, just the essentials. Clothes, personal documents, my collection of antique clocks, tools from the workshop. I'd already arranged a furnished rental apartment in Lakewood Ranch, a quiet community 15 minutes away. 1 bedroom, modern kitchen, $1,850 a month. Small, but it was mine. Truly mine, with no one treating me like an unwelcome guest. Loading boxes into my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Each item I removed from that house was like shedding weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Trey came out while I was loading the trunk. "Dad, wait. Can we talk?" "You have my attorney's contact information." "Come on, don't be like that. We can work this out." I straightened up, closed the trunk. "Trey, do you remember the text you sent me?" "Disappear, old man. My wife can't stand having you around." Those were your words. Exact quote. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. I was angry. Rachel was upset about the dinner thing, and You chose her feelings over basic decency. That's fine. People make choices, but choices have consequences. "So what? You're just going to abandon us?" The irony was so thick I almost laughed. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm offering you a straightforward transaction, pay rent like adults, or find somewhere else to live. The fact that you're calling this abandonment tells me everything I need to know about how you've been viewing our arrangement. We can't afford $3,200 a month. Then I suggest you find somewhere you can afford. I hear there are nice apartments in Sarasota for $1,400 a month. Might require downsizing from the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to, but that's what budgets are for." I got in my car. Through the window, I could see Rachel watching from the living room, arms crossed, face hard. She'd probably told Trey exactly what to say, how to manipulate me into backing down. The old Ralph would have felt guilty, would have second-guessed himself. The new Ralph started the engine and drove away. The apartment in Lakewood Ranch was exactly what I needed. Clean, quiet, no history. I spent the afternoon arranging my clocks on shelves, setting up my small workshop area in the spare closet. Each clock I wound and set felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. That evening I met with Lisa Stewart, not a friend, just a notary and financial consultant I'd hired for document verification. Professional, efficient, expensive, worth every penny. "The notice has been served," I told her. "They have until mid-March to comply or vacate. And if they don't, then we proceed to formal eviction filing. But there's another element I want to address." I pulled out a folder. 3 years ago, I co-signed 2 loans for them. One for Rachel's Audi Q5, $32,000. Another for what Trey called a business venture that went nowhere, $15,000. Total remaining balance across both, $41,200. Lisa reviewed the documents. "You're listed as co-signer, which means you're equally liable for repayment. But I can remove myself from that obligation, correct? Under certain circumstances? Changed family circumstances would qualify. Divorce, estrangement, financial hardship on your end. Given that you're literally evicting them from your property, I'd say estrangement is well documented." She looked up. "You want to trigger a credit reevaluation?" "Exactly. Without my income backing these loans, their debt-to-income ratio fails bank requirements. They'll have to either find a new co-signer, pay off the balance immediately, or face repossession and default. That's aggressive. That's fair. I helped them when they needed it. They repaid me with contempt. Natural consequences." Lisa nodded slowly. "I'll prepare the documentation. You'll need to submit formal notices to both lending institutions. Allow 2 weeks for processing. Perfect timing. That puts us right before their 30-day deadline expires." Driving home, to my new home, I felt something unfamiliar. Anticipation. For 5 years I'd been reacting to their behavior, absorbing their disrespect, making excuses. Now I was acting. Strategically, methodically. Rachel posted on Instagram that night. I didn't follow her, but Cynthia showed me. Apparently it had been shared by several mutual acquaintances. A long caption about toxic family members and narcissistic behavior, and choosing yourself over blood. The photo was of her and Trey looking somber and brave, clearly staged. Hashtag toxic family, hashtag setting boundaries, hashtag choosing peace. It had 847 likes when Cynthia showed it to me. "Does this bother you?" she asked. "Should it?" She's trying to control the narrative, make you the villain. Let her. The people who matter know the truth. The people who don't matter can believe whatever makes them feel better. I handed back her phone. Besides, social media outrage is temporary. Legal documents are permanent. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from a distance as they scrambled. Trey called old friends asking about job openings that paid more. Rachel suddenly started posting about freelance consulting opportunities and expanding her brand. Neither approach would generate an extra $3,200 monthly in time. I knew because I'd run the numbers. Their expenses were locked in: car payments, insurance, credit cards, the lifestyle Rachel broadcast online. Even if they cut everything to bare minimum, they couldn't make the math work without my subsidy. They were about to learn a lesson I'd known my entire career. You can't budget yourself out of living beyond your means. You can only cut costs or increase income, and both take time they didn't have. The deadline was approaching. Mid-March, marked clearly on my calendar. They had 2 weeks left, and I had one more move to make. The real game hadn't even started yet. 2 weeks before the deadline, I scheduled another meeting with Gerald Mitchell. His office had become familiar territory. Same leather chairs, same view of downtown Sarasota, same efficient professionalism that I appreciated more each visit. "They haven't made a single payment," I told him, sliding a bank statement across his desk. "Not even a partial one. And they haven't contacted your office about payment plans or negotiations." Gerald reviewed the statement. "That's actually helpful for our case. Shows a pattern of non-compliance rather than financial hardship with intent to pay. Florida courts look favorably on landlords who give proper notice and opportunity to remedy. What's our timeline for formal eviction if they don't comply by the deadline?" "We file the eviction notice with the court the day after the 30-day period expires. Given that they've received proper written notice and haven't attempted to pay or negotiate, the court hearing should be scheduled within 3 weeks. The judge will likely rule in your favor immediately. This is straightforward breach of agreement." "And the second part?" Gerald pulled out another folder. "The cosigner withdrawal documentation is ready. I've prepared formal notices to both SunTrust Bank for the auto loan and Prosper Financial for the personal loan. Once you sign, these go out certified mail. The banks have to acknowledge receipt, then they'll reevaluate the borrower's creditworthiness without your income factored in." "How long before they notify Trey and Rachel?" "Typically 7 to 10 business days. The banks will send letters stating that due to change cosigner circumstances, the loans are under review. They'll have options. Find a replacement cosigner with qualifying income, pay the balance in full, or accept repossession and default consequences." I signed the documents, my handwriting steady. "What are the chances they can find another cosigner?" "Slim. They'd need someone with stable income, good credit, and willingness to take on $41,200 in liability. Rachel's parents are the obvious choice, but they won't. Rachel burned that bridge 2 years ago when she borrowed $8,000 for emergency medical expenses that turned out to be a trip to Aruba." Gerald's eyebrow lifted slightly. "You knew about that?" "I know everything. I just didn't act on it before." I gathered the signed papers. "Now I am." Walking to my car afterward, I felt that same clarity I'd experienced in my workshop with the clocks, each piece fitting into place, each component serving its purpose. The mechanism would run because I'd built it precisely. That afternoon, I drove to my rental properties, all 7 of them scattered across Sarasota County. Monthly routine inspections, checking on maintenance issues, meeting with tenants. The portfolio generated $8,400 monthly after expenses, enough to live comfortably even without touching my retirement savings. At the third property, a duplex near the bay, I met with Marcus and Jennifer Chen, a young couple who'd been model tenants for 18 months. They'd just had their first baby. Mr. Coleman, we wanted to ask— Jennifer held the baby carefully, looking nervous. Would you consider renewing our lease for another 2 years instead of 1? We love this place, and with the baby, we'd prefer stability. Of course, I'll have the paperwork drawn up. Marcus exhaled with relief. Thank you. We were worried you might raise the rent. A lot of landlords in the area are increasing by 15, 20%. I don't operate that way. You pay on time, maintain the property, communicate about issues promptly. Why would I want to lose good tenants? I smiled. Fair treatment goes both ways. You respect my investment, I respect your home. Driving away, I thought about the contrast. These strangers treated my property better than my own son had treated my house. They paid every month without complaint. They fixed minor issues themselves. They sent me a thank you card last Christmas. Trey had sent me a text telling me to disappear. That evening, Cynthia made dinner at her place. Homemade lasagna, garlic bread, a bottle of wine I'd brought from my collection. We ate on her screened porch, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood winding down for the night. You seem different, she observed. More settled. I feel different. For years, I've been trying to solve a problem that couldn't be solved. You can't make people appreciate you. You can't force respect. I was exhausting myself trying to be enough for people who saw me as a resource, not a person. And now? Now I'm protecting what's mine, not out of anger, out of principle. I set down my wine glass. Do you think I'm being cruel? I think you're being fair. There's a difference between cruelty and consequences. She reached across the table, took my hand. Cruelty would be destroying them for pleasure. Consequences are what happen when people refuse to learn gentler lessons. They had 5 years of gentle lessons. Exactly. The next week moved quickly. I submitted the co-signer withdrawal paperwork. Gerald filed preliminary eviction documents, ready to submit the moment the deadline passed. I organized my new apartment, made it truly mine. Photos on the walls, my favorite chair positioned by the window, my workshop area arranged exactly how I wanted it. No one asking why I had so many clocks, no one mocking my hobbies, no one making me feel like a stranger in my own space. I was having coffee on my small balconies when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Coleman? A woman's voice, professional. This is Diana Martinez from SunTrust Bank. I'm calling regarding account number ending in 4739, for which you're listed as co-signer. Yes? We received your request to be removed from co-signer obligations. I wanted to confirm this is accurate before we proceed with credit reevaluation. It's accurate. Changed family circumstances. The primary borrowers and I are no longer in a financial relationship. I understand. The reevaluation will take approximately 5 business days. The primary borrowers will be notified of the results via certified mail. Thank you for confirming. After I hung up, I sat there watching the morning light spread across the parking lot. In 5 days, Trey and Rachel would get a letter explaining their loan was being called due, pay $41,200 immediately, find a new co-signer, or face repossession and credit damage. They'd have no idea I was behind it. The bank wouldn't disclose that level of detail. They'd just know their financial foundation was crumbling, and they wouldn't understand why. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted better than it had in years. The weekend before the deadline, Rachel posted another Instagram story. I didn't watch it. Cynthia did, then told me about it over chess. She's claiming elder abuse, Cynthia said, moving her knight. Says you're trying to make them homeless out of spite because they wouldn't accept your girlfriend. Interesting narrative. Several people in the comments are calling her out. One person, I think they're from your old real estate office, left a long comment about how you've been supporting them for 5 years, and they've never contributed financially. Who was it? Someone named Patricia Hernandez? I smiled. Patricia had been my office manager for 12 years before she retired. Sharp as a tack. Zero tolerance for nonsense. She worked for me for over a decade, knows exactly how property ownership and expenses work. Her comment got 200 likes, more than Rachel's original post. The truth has a way of cutting through eventually. We finished our game, Cynthia won, as she often did, and I drove back to my apartment. Peaceful, quiet. No tension hovering in the air, no passive-aggressive comments, no feeling like I had to apologize for existing in my own space. This was what freedom felt like. 3 days before the deadline, Trey called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message later. "Dad, please, we're trying. We've been looking for places we can afford, but everything requires first month, last month, security deposit. We don't have that kind of cash right now. Can't you give us more time? 60 days instead of 30? We're family." Family. The word that was supposed to mean unconditional love and support. The word they'd used when they needed something but forgotten, when I needed basic respect. I didn't call back. The night before the deadline, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, from anticipation. I sat in my workshop area, working on a 1930s Seth Thomas clock that had been sitting broken in someone's attic for decades. The previous owner had tried to fix it themselves, made things worse. Stripped screws, bent parts, wrong-sized replacements forced into delicate mechanisms. Some damage you can repair. Some damage requires complete disassembly and rebuilding from scratch. I worked until 3 a.m., carefully removing each damaged component, cleaning decades of accumulated grime, fitting new parts where the old ones had been destroyed beyond repair. By the time I finished, the clock ran perfectly, smooth, precise, reliable. I set it on the shelf next to my other restorations. 17 clocks now, each one a small victory. Each one proof that patience and precision could restore what seemed broken beyond hope. The next morning, I called Gerald at 9 a.m. sharp. "It's time," I said. "They haven't paid. They haven't moved. File the eviction notice. Consider it done." I hung up and looked around my apartment. Small, but mine. Peaceful, but mine. Simple, but mine. And that's when I understood the real lesson I'd been learning all along. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about understanding my own worth and refusing to accept less than basic human dignity. Trey and Rachel were about to learn what they'd actually lost. Not a house. They'd never really had that. Not financial support. That had always been conditional on basic respect. They just hadn't realized it. They were about to lose the safety net of someone who'd loved them unconditionally until they'd made that love too expensive to maintain. And I was about to discover something I'd forgotten existed: self-respect. The day after the deadline passed, Gerald filed the eviction notice with the Sarasota County Court. I received a copy via email at 11:23 a.m., opened it on my laptop while drinking coffee on my balcony. The legal language was precise and clinical. Failure to comply with rental payment obligations, breach of verbal agreement, 30-day notice period expired without remedy. Court date scheduled for 3 weeks out, mid-April. I forwarded the document to my secure cloud storage, then deleted the email. No need to dwell on it. The machinery was in motion now, moving with the inevitability of those clocks I restored, tick by tick, second by second, toward an outcome determined by simple cause and effect. That afternoon, I was rotating the oil in my car when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Mr. Coleman?" A professional female voice. "This is Jennifer Hayes from Prosper Financial. I'm calling regarding personal loan account 88473392, for which you were listed as cosigner." My hand tightened on the phone. "Yes?" "We completed the credit reevaluation following your withdrawal request. Unfortunately, the primary borrowers, Trey Coleman and Rachel Coleman, no longer meet our lending criteria without a qualified cosigner. We've sent them notification that the loan balance of $15,847 is now due in full within 14 days. "I see. If they're unable to pay or secure a replacement cosigner by that deadline, the account will be turned over to collections and reported to credit agencies as a default. I wanted to inform you as a courtesy, given your previous involvement." "I appreciate the notification." After she hung up, I sat there in my parking space, socket wrench in hand, doing the math. The personal loan plus the auto loan equaled $41,200 total, with Trey's bank account at roughly $3,200 and Rachel's at under $900. They had about $4,100 between them. Even if they liquidated everything, sold furniture, jewelry, whatever Rachel used for her Instagram photos, they'd be lucky to scrape together $10,000. They were short by more than $30,000 with a 2-week deadline. The satisfaction I felt wasn't cruel. It was the same feeling I got when a complex property deal closed exactly as planned. The reward for preparation, patience, and understanding how systems work. 2 days later, Trey showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole, shoulders slumped, circles under his eyes, wearing the same shirt he'd worn the day before, based on the coffee stain I'd noticed when he'd posted an Instagram story Rachel had tagged him in. He knocked softly, almost apologetically. I waited 5 seconds, then opened the door. Didn't invite him in. "Dad," his voice cracked slightly. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "About everything. The house. The eviction. I got a notice from court. There's a hearing in a few weeks." "That's correct. You failed to pay rent or vacate the property. Florida law is very clear about the next steps. We can't afford to move right now. All the deposits, the moving costs. Dad, please. Just give us a little more time." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Trey, you've had 5 years of more time. Free housing, free utilities, free groceries. The only thing I asked for was basic respect, and you couldn't manage that. I know I messed up with that text. I was angry. Rachel was upset. This isn't about one text message. This is about 5 years of contempt. 5 years of treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. 5 years of taking everything while giving nothing." His face flushed. "That's not fair. We appreciated what you did. Show me evidence of that appreciation. One thank you card. 1 month where you cleaned up after yourselves. 1 conversation where you asked about my life instead of demanding more from yours." I watched him struggle to respond. "You can't, because it never happened. We can pay you back, for the rent, for everything, once we get on our feet. With what money? Your combined income is $70,000 a year and you're already drowning in debt." I paused. "Speaking of which, you might want to check your mail. I think your creditors have been trying to reach you." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe realization. "What do you mean?" "I mean that co-signing loans for people is a favor, not an obligation, and favors can be withdrawn when circumstances change." "You didn't." His face went pale. "Dad, those loans, we can't pay those off. The Audi alone." "Then you should have thought about that before sending me that text message." I stepped back into my apartment. "The court hearing is April 7th. I suggest you attend. Bring documentation if you have any defense to present." "What documentation?" "You own the house. We don't have anything." "Exactly?" I started closing the door. "That's exactly my point." "Dad, please. This is our home." I stopped, door half closed, and looked at him through the gap. Really looked at him. The boy who used to run to greet me was gone, replaced by a man who'd learned entitlement from his wife and forgotten gratitude from his father. "Trey, answer me honestly. If our positions were reversed, if I had been living in your house rent-free for 5 years, and you needed that space or that money, and I told you to disappear, old man, what would you do?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "That's what I thought." I closed the door. Through the peephole, I watched him stand there for nearly a minute before turning and walking away, shoulders even more slumped than when he'd arrived. That evening, I met Cynthia for dinner at a small Italian place near the bay. She noticed my mood immediately. "Good day or bad day?" "Interesting day." Trey came by. And he's starting to understand that actions have consequences. Slowly, painfully, but the lesson's sinking in. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, mostly. For years I thought I was doing something wrong. That if I just tried harder, gave more, was more patient, he'd appreciate it. But some people don't want a father. They want a bank account that doesn't require relationship maintenance. You deserve better than that. I'm starting to believe it." The court date approached like a train on predetermined tracks. Gerald called periodically with updates. Trey and Rachel had retained a legal aid attorney, but their case was weak. No written lease meant no contract to dispute. No payment history meant no defense against eviction. No documentation of ownership meant no claim to the property. They're going to argue hardship, Gerald told me over the phone, that you're making them homeless without cause. And our response? That you gave 30 days' notice and offered market-rate rental terms they declined. That's not eviction without cause. That's eviction for non-payment after proper notice. Textbook legal process. When will the bank move on the car? They sent final notice yesterday. If Trey and Rachel don't pay or surrender the vehicle by week's end, they'll send a repo agent. I made a note on my calendar. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The night before the court hearing, I laid out my clothes for the next day. Simple business casual, nothing flashy. Reviewed my documentation folder one final time. Property deed, utility bills, tax records, the original 30-day notice, proof of certified mail delivery. Everything in order, everything precise. At 2 a.m. I was still awake, so I went to my workshop and wound my clocks. All 17 of them, one by one, adjusting the time on each to synchronize perfectly. The ticking filled the apartment, a chorus of mechanical heartbeats, each one marking time's passage with indifferent accuracy. Time doesn't care about excuses or sob stories. Time doesn't negotiate. Time simply moves forward, and you either move with it or get left behind. Trey and Rachel were about to learn that lesson in the most public way possible. Tomorrow, in a courtroom, with a judge presiding, the truth would be documented in legal record. They were tenants who'd failed to pay, living in a house they didn't own, claiming rights they'd never earned. And I was the property owner exercising my legal right to reclaim what had always been mine. The clock struck 3 a.m. I smiled and finally went to bed. The Sarasota County Courthouse smelled like floor polish and recycled air. I arrived 20 minutes early, sat on a bench in the hallway outside courtroom 4B, and reviewed my documents one final time. Gerald sat beside me, equally composed, checking his notes. "Remember," he said quietly, "let me do the talking. You're here to answer questions if the judge asks, but otherwise, let the documentation speak." Understood. At 9:45, they appeared at the end of the hallway. Trey wore a wrinkled suit that looked borrowed, too short in the sleeves, too loose in the shoulders. Rachel had dressed in what she probably thought was court-appropriate. A modest black dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. She'd even removed her usual collection of statement jewelry, the performance of respectability. Their legal aid attorney, a tired-looking woman in her 40s carrying an overstuffed briefcase, waved them over to a different bench. They sat 20 feet away from us, and the contrast was stark. Gerald and I looked like we belonged there, prepared, professional, calm. Trey and Rachel looked like people who'd been summoned against their will, which I supposed was accurate. Rachel glanced my direction once. I didn't react, just looked at her with the same expression I'd used to assess rental property damage. Clinical, detached, cataloging facts. Her jaw tightened. She whispered something to Trey. He shook his head, put a hand on her arm. Smart boy, starting a confrontation in the courthouse hallway wouldn't help their case. At 10 a.m. exactly, the bailiff called our case number. We filed into the courtroom, Judge Patricia Morrison presiding, a woman in her mid-60s with steel-gray hair and the expression of someone who'd heard every excuse ever invented. Gerald presented our case first. His voice was measured, professional, backed by decades of real estate law experience. He walked Judge Morrison through the timeline, 5 years of rent-free occupation, the 30-day notice delivered and signed for, the offer of market-rate rental terms, the defendant's failure to pay or vacate. He submitted our evidence, property deed showing sole ownership, utility bills showing sole payment responsibility, the written 30-day notice, the certified mail receipt proving delivery. Judge Morrison reviewed each document carefully. "Mr. Coleman, you're the property owner?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "And these are your son and daughter-in-law residing in the property?" "They are." "Did you ever establish a written lease agreement?" "No, Your Honor. It was a verbal family arrangement that began as temporary housing assistance." "And when did you decide to formalize rental terms?" "When it became clear that the temporary situation had become permanent exploitation, Your Honor. They expected indefinite free housing while treating me with contempt in my own home." The legal aid attorney objected to contempt as characterization rather than fact. Judge Morrison sustained it, told me to stick to concrete terms. Gerald shot me a look. Let him handle it. The attorney presented their side. Hardship, family obligation, the cruelty of making blood relatives homeless. She painted a picture of an elderly man turning cold-hearted, abandoning family when they needed him most. It was actually impressive fiction. Then Gerald stood for cross-examination, and I watched the story crumble. Ms. Patterson, you claim hardship prevented your clients from securing alternative housing. Can you explain why they drove a $32,000 Audi Q5 during this period of supposed hardship? The attorney fumbled. They needed reliable transportation for work. Did they need designer clothing, weekend trips to Miami? A lifestyle that, according to social media posts your client Rachel made publicly, included regular dining at restaurants averaging $80 per meal? Rachel's face flushed red. She hadn't expected her Instagram to become evidence. Gerald continued, calm and relentless. The defendants claim family obligation. Yet can they produce any evidence of gratitude or reciprocal support? Any payment toward utilities? Any contribution to household maintenance? Even a simple thank you card for 5 years of free housing worth approximately $192,000. Silence from their side of the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked over her glasses at Trey and Rachel. Did either of you ever pay rent to your father? Trey stood slowly. No, Your Honor, but did you contribute to utilities, property taxes, insurance, or maintenance? We helped around the house sometimes. I'm asking about financial contributions, Mr. Coleman. Yes or no? No, Your Honor. Did you have a written agreement promising you could live there indefinitely without payment? No, but he's our father. You thought wrong. Judge Morrison's voice cut sharp. Legal rights aren't based on assumptions or expectations. They're based on documentation and law. She turned to Rachel. Mrs. Coleman, did you or did you not post on social media calling this property our home and claiming ownership rights? Rachel stood, her practiced composure cracking. Yes, but that's how it felt. We'd been there 5 years. Feelings don't establish property rights. The deed does, and the deed shows Ralph Coleman as sole owner. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents one final time. This is straightforward. The plaintiff owns the property, gave proper legal notice, offered reasonable rental terms that were declined, and now seeks possession. The defendants have no legal grounds to remain. She looked up. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Trey and Rachel Coleman, you have 21 days from today to vacate the property at 1847 Magnolia Drive. If you fail to do so, the sheriff will enforce eviction with a writ of possession. All personal property must be removed. Any items remaining after the deadline become property of the landlord to dispose of as he sees fit. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Rachel made a noise, half sob, half gasp. Trey grabbed her hand, but his own was shaking. I could see it from across the courtroom, the fine tremor of someone whose world had just collapsed. Their attorney tried to argue for more time. 30 days instead of 21, please. Your Honor, they have nowhere to go. Judge Morrison denied it. They had 30 days' notice before this hearing. They've had sufficient time to prepare. 21 days is generous under the circumstances. We stood as the judge left. I gathered my documents while Gerald spoke quietly with the court clerk about the formal eviction order. Across the room, Rachel was crying. Real tears now, not the performance kind. Trey had his arm around her, but his face had gone gray, like someone in shock. As we left the courtroom, Rachel's voice followed us into the hallway. This is all your fault. You manipulated him. You turned him against his own son. I stopped walking, turned, looked at her directly. Rachel, I didn't turn Trey against me. You did that all by yourself. I just stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once in 5 years, she had nothing to say. Gerald and I walked out of the courthouse into bright April sunshine. The air smelled like salt from the bay and fresh-cut grass from the courthouse lawn. It smelled like freedom. That went well, Gerald said. Better than expected. What's your next step? I thought about the house on Magnolia Drive, about the clocks in my apartment, about Cynthia waiting to hear how the hearing went, about the life I was building that didn't include ungrateful people who mistook kindness for weakness. I list the property for sale next week. Cash buyers only. Close fast. And Trey gets 21 days to figure out what adults do when they lose their safety net. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I opened it. You'll regret this. We'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I showed it to Gerald. He raised an eyebrow. Threatening messages after a court loss. That's bold. That's desperate. I deleted the text. Let them tell whoever they want. The truth is documented in court records now. Everything else is just noise. We shook hands in the parking lot. Gerald drove back to his office. I drove to my apartment, made coffee, and called Cynthia. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as predicted. They have 3 weeks to vacate. How do you feel? I looked around my small, peaceful apartment, at my clocks, ticking in harmony, at the life I was reclaiming piece by piece. Free, I said. For the first time in 5 years, I feel completely free. That evening, I received another notification. The bank had repossessed Rachel's Audi Q5. According to the automated message, the vehicle had been located and recovered the previous night. Apparently, they'd been tipped off about its location at a motel on the outskirts of town. A motel. They were already living in a motel. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd designed them to fall, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls, all from Trey. I didn't return them. Instead, I made coffee, checked my email, and found a message from a real estate agent I'd contacted the previous week. Mr. Coleman, I have excellent news. The couple who viewed the property yesterday, Dr. Sarah Chen and Dr. Marcus Washington, both physicians at Sarasota Memorial, are prepared to make a cash offer. They're offering $695,000, closing within 3 weeks. Please advise if you'd like to accept. I typed back immediately, accept the offer. Let's close as quickly as possible. Within 2 hours, the paperwork was in motion. The property that Trey and Rachel had called theirs for 5 years would belong to someone else before the month ended, someone who'd actually paid for it. The irony was delicious. That afternoon, my phone rang. This time it was Rachel, not Trey. I answered, curious what approach she'd take. Ralph. Her voice was different, smaller, uncertain. The confident influencer persona had cracked. We need to talk. About what? About everything. The house, the loans, the car. A pause. We made mistakes. I made mistakes. But we can fix this. We can work something out. There's nothing to work out. You have 3 weeks to vacate a property you never owned. You have debts you can't pay. Those are your problems to solve, not mine. But the bank is suing us. Our credit is ruined. Trey lost his job because his boss saw the court records. Stop. My voice cut clean. You're calling to tell me about consequences as if I should feel guilty for them. But these aren't consequences I created. These are consequences you earned. We're living in a motel, Ralph. A $50 a night motel that smells like cigarettes and mold. Then find somewhere cheaper. Or find better jobs. Or call Rachel's parents. Call anyone but me. My parents won't help. They said... She stopped herself. They said what? They said I made my bed and should lie in it. Her voice turned bitter. Just like you. Everyone's abandoned us. Rachel, you can't abandon people who were using you. You cut them off once they stopped being useful. That's called cause and effect. I walked to my window, looked out at the parking lot. How many brand sponsorships have you lost? Silence. All of them? Most of them. She sounded defeated. The ones that haven't explicitly dropped me just stopped responding. My follower count is down to 9,000. People are asking questions I can't answer without looking worse. Perhaps you should try being honest. Tell them you lived rent-free in your father-in-law's house for 5 years, treated him like garbage, and are now facing natural consequences. See how that performs with your engagement metrics. That's cruel. That's truth. You've confused the two for so long you don't recognize honesty anymore. I heard her breathing quicken. Tears, probably. Rachel, I'm going to say something, and I want you to really hear it. You spent 5 years building a lifestyle you couldn't afford, funded by my generosity, while treating me with open contempt. You convinced my son that I was the problem. You made my own home feel like enemy territory. And now that I've removed myself from that situation, you're angry at me for the collapse? That's not how this works. We'll tell everyone what you did. You'll what? Tell people I evicted you for non-payment of rent? That I withdrew co-signing support from loans after you insulted me? Please, by all means, tell everyone. I have court documents, text messages, and 5 years of unpaid bills to back up my version. What do you have? Instagram posts and entitlement? She hung up. I smiled, set down my phone, and returned to my day. 2 days later, I received a notification from the county clerk's office. Trey and Rachel had filed for bankruptcy protection. Chapter 7, Liquidation. According to the filing, their debts totaled $58,400 against assets of approximately $11,200. The bankruptcy trustee would sell everything they owned to partially satisfy creditors. I calculated quickly. Even if they sold everything, they'd still owe roughly $47,000 after the bankruptcy cleared. Their credit would be destroyed for years. Their ability to rent decent housing, get reasonable interest rates, or live the lifestyle Rachel had built her identity around, gone. Not because I destroyed them, because they'd built a house of cards on my foundation, and I'd simply moved. That weekend I met with the buyers, Dr. Chen and Dr. Washington. They were in their early 30s, excited about the house, already planning renovations. Sarah wanted to convert the garage workshop into a home office. Marcus talked about adding solar panels. The previous tenants, Sarah asked carefully, they'll be completely out by closing? They'll be out within the week, court-ordered eviction already processed. Family situation, Marcus guessed. My son and daughter-in-law. They confused generosity with obligation. Sarah nodded slowly. My father always said the hardest part of helping family is knowing when to stop. Your father was a wise man. We shook hands. The closing was scheduled for early June, barely a month away. I'd walk away with $695,000, minus the remaining mortgage balance of $87,000, minus closing costs of about $13,000. Net proceeds, $595,000, more than enough to start the next chapter. The eviction date arrived like clockwork. I didn't attend. Gerald handled the formal transfer of possession, but he called me afterward. They weren't there, he said. They'd already cleared out. Left the keys on the kitchen counter. The place is empty except for some damaged furniture they couldn't sell and some trash in the master bedroom. Damage? Stains on the carpet. Holes in the walls. Looks like anger, not accident. I took photos for your insurance claim. Of course they'd damaged it. One final act of spite, as if destroying property they never owned would somehow hurt me more than themselves. I filed the insurance claim that afternoon. The payout would cover professional cleaning and repairs before closing. The buyers would never know. That evening, Trey called one final time. I answered, Dad. His voice was hollow. We're being sued by the bank for $41,200. They're garnishing my wages from any future employment. The bankruptcy won't discharge it because, he stopped, because you withdrew co-signing support rather than defaulting. The judge said that makes me primarily liable. That's correct. The bank explained that option when I withdrew my guarantee. It was cleaner than defaulting and hurting my credit. So you knew. You knew this would happen. I knew the legal process, yes. How could you do this to your own son? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Trey, I raised you. I supported you. I gave you every opportunity. And when you met Rachel, you chose her contempt over my dignity. You chose her manipulation over my love. You sent me a text message telling me to disappear from my own home. So I did. I disappeared. And now you're learning what life costs without someone subsidizing it. I said I was sorry. I apologized. You apologized after facing consequences, not after realizing you were wrong. There's a difference. One is remorse. The other is just fear. What do you want from me? Nothing. I want nothing from you, Trey. That's the point. For 5 years, you wanted everything from me while giving nothing back. Now we're even. You have nothing to give, and I want nothing to take. So that's it? You're just done? With your only son? I looked around my apartment, at my restored clocks, each one ticking in perfect rhythm. At the photo of Cynthia and me at our last chess tournament. At the life I'd built from the pieces they'd tried to destroy. I'm not done with my son. I'm done being treated like an ATM machine by two adults who confused kindness with weakness. If you ever figure out the difference, if you ever become the man I raised you to be instead of the man Rachel shaped you into, maybe we can talk. But that's on you to prove, not on me to accept. I hate you. No, you don't. You hate that your safety net is gone. There's a difference. I hung up. The dominoes had fallen. Every single one in exactly the sequence I'd designed 3 years ago when I'd first visited Gerald's office and started preparing for this possibility. They wanted me gone. I disappeared. And everything they'd built on my foundation collapsed right behind me. The week after the house closed, I focused on my own future. I found a villa in Siesta Key, 2 bedrooms, ocean view, recently renovated. The seller was motivated, accepted my offer of $385,000 cash, closing scheduled for midsummer. Cynthia helped me pick out furniture, plan the layout. For the first time in years, I was building something that was entirely mine. No compromise, no negotiation, just choices that made me happy. "You're smiling more," she observed one afternoon while we reviewed paint colors. "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying weight I didn't realize was there." That's what happens when you stop letting people drain you. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Coleman, this is Detective Sarah Mendoza, Sarasota Police Department. I need to speak with you about a report filed by your son, Trey Coleman." My stomach tightened. What kind of report? He's claiming financial elder abuse. Says you coerced him into vacating property that was jointly owned, that you manipulated legal documents, and that you're withholding assets that belong to him through inheritance rights. I sat down slowly. Those are serious accusations, and completely false. I understand that, but I need to investigate the complaint formally. Can you come to the station tomorrow to provide a statement? I'll bring my attorney. That evening I called Gerald. He listened to the details, then laughed. Actually laughed. "Ralph, this is desperation. Pure, transparent desperation. They're hoping you'll panic and offer them money to make it go away. Will it cause problems? None. You have documentation for everything. Property deed, court records, eviction proceedings, bankruptcy filings. Every action you took was legal and above board. This is a false report, and once the detective sees your evidence, it'll be dismissed. And if they pursue it anyway, then they face charges for filing a false police report, which given their current legal situation would be monumentally stupid." The next day, Gerald and I met Detective Mendoza at the police station. I brought 3 file folders, property documents, court records, and financial statements, showing 5 years of unpaid housing costs. Detective Mendoza reviewed everything for 20 minutes. Then she looked up. "Mr. Coleman, I don't see any evidence of abuse here. I see a property owner who gave extensive notice, followed legal eviction procedures, and withdrew from voluntary co-signing agreements after being mistreated. These are all protected actions under Florida law. So the complaint is dismissed? I'll document that the allegations are unsupported by evidence. If your son files additional complaints of this nature, he may face consequences for misuse of police resources." She closed the folders. "I'm sorry you had to deal with this. Family situations are difficult." "Thank you, Detective." Walking out of the station, Gerald clapped my shoulder. "That's their best shot, a bogus elder abuse claim. They're running out of options. Good, let them flail." But 2 days later, another attack came, this time through social media. Rachel had created a new Instagram account under a pseudonym, Surviving Narcissistic Abuse. Her first post was a long essay about toxic parents who punish adult children for setting boundaries. She didn't name me directly. She didn't have to. Anyone who'd followed her original account would recognize the story. The post went semi-viral in certain circles, 1,200 likes, 300 shares, dozens of comments supporting her, calling me a monster, suggesting legal action, sharing their own stories of parental narcissism. Cynthia found it first, showed it to me with concern in her eyes. I read it twice, then shrugged. Let her have it. "You're not worried?" "About what?" "She's telling a curated version of events to strangers who don't know the full story. Let them believe her. The people who matter, The courts, the police, everyone with access to actual facts, they know the truth. But doesn't it bother you, being called abusive? I thought about it, really thought about it. No, because I know what I did and why I did it. I protected myself from people who were using me. If that makes me a narcissist in her version, so be it. I'd rather be called names by people who don't matter than be exploited by people who should. The social media campaign lasted a week before fizzling out. Rachel didn't have the platform she'd once had. Her followers were gone, her credibility shot, her story too one-sided to maintain interest once people started asking for evidence. A few commenters found the court records, public information, and started posting questions. If he evicted you illegally, why didn't the judge stop it? If this was abuse, why did multiple institutions side with him? You lived there 5 years without paying rent, and you're the victim? Rachel deleted the account within days. Meanwhile, my new life took shape. I moved into the Siesta Key Villa in early August. Cynthia helped me arrange my clock collection in the living room, all 17 of them plus 3 new acquisitions I'd found at an estate sale. The ticking filled the space with life, with time moving forward, with proof that broken things could be restored. One evening in late August, I sat on my back deck, watching the sunset over the Gulf of Mexico. The water was the color of burnt orange and liquid gold. Pelicans dove for fish. A couple walked along the beach holding hands. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "Dad, it's Trey, using a friend's phone. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know. Rachel left. She met someone at her cashier job, some guy with money, moved to Tampa with him last week, filed for divorce. I'm alone now, working overnight security, living in a rented room. Everything fell apart. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm not asking for help. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what you meant. About consequences. About choices. About respect. I'm sorry it took losing everything to see it. I read it 3 times, looked at the sunset, looked at the text again. Then I typed back, "Thank you for telling me. I hope you find your way, but that's something you need to do on your own." I didn't block the number. I just set down the phone. Cynthia came out onto the deck, handed me a glass of wine. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay." I pulled her close, watched the sun disappear below the horizon. Everything's exactly as it should be. For the first time in 5 years, maybe longer, I felt completely at peace, not because I'd destroyed anyone, not because revenge was sweet, but because I'd finally learned the hardest lesson of all. Some people will only value you once they realize you're not coming back, and by then, it's too late. The sun set, the clocks ticked, and I smiled, knowing I'd chosen myself over people who'd never chosen me. That was enough. September arrived with cooler mornings and clearer skies. I'd settled into my new routine. Coffee on the deck at sunrise. Maintenance calls for my rental properties in the morning. Afternoons with Cynthia exploring Sarasota's art galleries and restaurants. Evenings working on my clock collection or reading on the beach. Life had a rhythm now, not the chaotic, exhausting rhythm of managing other people's dysfunction, but the steady, peaceful rhythm of time well spent. Then one afternoon in mid-September, the mail carrier delivered a thick envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages, front and back, in Trey's unmistakable, cramped handwriting. I almost didn't read it, almost threw it away unopened, but something made me sit down at my kitchen table, pour a glass of iced tea, and unfold the pages. "Dad," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to read this. But I need to say these things, even if you never respond." The letter detailed everything that had happened since we'd last spoken. Rachel leaving him for a regional manager at a furniture store, someone with a steady income, a good credit score, prospects. The divorce papers she'd filed, claiming irreconcilable differences and requesting no alimony from either side. Her Instagram posts from Tampa, already rebuilding her lifestyle brand with her new boyfriend's money. Trey wrote about his new job, overnight security at a construction site, 12-hour shifts, $14.50 an hour. His rented room in a house with 3 other tenants, shared bathroom, no kitchen access. The therapy sessions he'd started attending at a free community clinic where he was finally confronting the truth about his choices. "I blamed you for everything," he wrote. "It was easier than admitting I'd failed, easier than facing the fact that I'd chosen comfort over character, enabling over earning, blame over accountability. Rachel didn't make me that way. She just found the weakness that was already there and used it." He wrote about working with his therapist to understand manipulation, codependency, the difference between love and transaction, about realizing that Rachel had never loved him. She'd loved what he could provide, and when that dried up, so did her affection. "I understand now what you were trying to teach me," the letter continued. "That respect isn't optional. That kindness should be reciprocated. That family doesn't mean unlimited access to someone's resources without gratitude or boundaries. I understand why you did what you did, and I'm not writing to ask for anything, not money, not help, not even forgiveness yet. I'm writing to say I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry, and to tell you that I'm trying to become the man you raised me to be, instead of the man I let myself become." The letter ended simply. "I love you, Dad. I always have. I just forgot how to show it. Maybe someday you'll let me try again. Until then, I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." Trey, I read the letter 3 times, set it on the table, stared out the window at the palm trees swaying in the breeze. My first instinct was anger. Too little, too late. Words are cheap when actions have consequences. My second instinct was satisfaction. See? He finally gets it. Took complete collapse, but he gets it now. But my third instinct, the one that surprised me, was something softer. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. The letter showed genuine introspection. No excuses, no deflection, no requests. Just accountability and acknowledgement. I picked up my phone, started typing a response, then stopped. Put the phone down. This wasn't something to text about. This required time, thought, the same careful consideration I'd given to every other decision in this situation. I folded the letter, put it in my desk drawer. Didn't throw it away, didn't respond immediately. Just acknowledged it existed and moved on with my day. That evening, Cynthia noticed my mood. Something happened? Trey wrote me a letter, a real one, handwritten, 3 pages. End? And it's a start. Not an end, not a resolution, just a start. What are you going to do? I thought about it. Nothing yet. He needs to prove this isn't just words, that it's actual change. If it's real, it'll still be real in 6 months, a year, however long it takes. And if he keeps trying, then maybe someday we'll have coffee, have a conversation, see if the man he's becoming can have a relationship with the man I've become. I looked at her. But that's far in the future. Right now, I'm focusing on this. Us. This house. This life. The one I built when I finally chose myself. She kissed my forehead. That sounds healthy. Feels healthy, too. The weeks passed. October arrived, bringing my birthday with it. 68 years old. Cynthia planned a small dinner party. Gerald Mitchell and his wife, Lisa Stewart and her husband, a few former colleagues from my real estate days. Nothing elaborate, just good food, good wine, good company. We gathered on my deck as the sun set, the gulf turning colors no painter could replicate. Gerald raised his glass in a toast. To Ralph Coleman, who proved that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary, who showed us all that kindness without respect is exploitation, and who reminded us that it's never too late to choose yourself. Everyone drank. I felt warmth spread through my chest, not from the wine, from the recognition. These people saw me, truly saw me, not as a resource to exploit, but as a person worthy of celebration. Lisa's husband, Michael, asked about my plans. What's next for you, Ralph? More real estate, travel, hobby projects? Living, I said simply. For 5 years I was surviving, managing conflict, absorbing contempt, trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Now I'm just living, and it turns out that's exactly what I needed. We ate dinner as the stars came out, laughed over old stories, made plans for future gatherings. It was simple, easy. The kind of evening I'd forgotten was possible when every interaction was a negotiation, every conversation a potential conflict. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number. I excused myself, walked to the far end of the deck, answered. Hello? Dad, Trey's voice trembling slightly. It's me. I know you're probably busy, but it's your birthday, and I wanted to call, to say happy birthday, to tell you I'm thinking about you. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the dark water. Thank you. I got a new job, assistant manager at a construction company. It's entry level, but it's something. $38,000 a year. I moved into a studio apartment. Small, but it's mine. Clean. Quiet. I'm still seeing the therapist. Still working on myself. That's good to hear. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I know you need space. I know I need to prove I've changed, not just say it. But I wanted you to know. I understand now. Everything you tried to teach me. Everything you sacrificed. Everything I took for granted. His voice broke slightly. I hope someday you'll let me show you I've learned. That I'm different. But until then, I just want you to know I'm sorry. And I love you. And happy birthday. I closed my eyes. Took a breath. Thank you for calling, Trey. I appreciate the update. I'm glad you're working on yourself. That's important. Does that mean... It means I need time. You hurt me deeply. You chose cruelty over kindness, and words are a start, but actions take longer to trust. I softened my voice slightly. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep growing. Keep changing. Maybe someday we'll talk more, but not today. Silence on the other end, then quietly, I understand. Thank you for answering. I won't bother you again unless you reach out first. That's probably best. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. I am. For the first time in years, I really am. I hung up, stood there for a moment, letting the ocean breeze cool my face. Then I walked back to my guests, back to my life, back to the celebration of another year lived on my own terms. Cynthia raised her eyebrows in question. I nodded. She understood without words. Another gift I'd forgotten existed. Someone who could read me without requiring explanation. The evening continued. More wine, more laughter, more stories. And somewhere in Tampa, Trey sat in his studio apartment, working through consequences and building a life from pieces, just like I'd done. The difference was I'd done it by reclaiming what was mine. He was doing it by losing everything he'd taken. Both were necessary journeys. Both were deserved. The birthday dinner wound down around midnight. Guests departed with hugs and promises to do it again soon. Cynthia and I cleaned up together, a comfortable silence between us punctuated by the clinking of glasses and plates. That was a good night, she said, loading the dishwasher. Perfect night. Even with Trey calling? Especially with Trey calling. I dried the wine glasses carefully, because I answered on my terms, set my boundaries, maintained my peace, and then came back to people who actually value me. She smiled. You've come a long way from the man I met at the chess tournament. That man was barely surviving. This man? I gestured around the kitchen, out toward the deck with its view of the Gulf. This man is actually living. We finished cleaning, then walked out to the deck one final time. The water was black silk under the moon. Somewhere out there, boats moved across the horizon, their lights tiny pinpricks against the vast darkness. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? Cynthia asked. I considered the question carefully. Maybe. Someday. If he proves he's truly changed. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means acknowledging that people can grow while maintaining the boundaries that protect you. That's very mature. It's very necessary. I pulled her close. For too long, I confused love with sacrifice, family with obligation, kindness with weakness. I'm done with that. If Trey wants a relationship with me, he'll have to earn it. Show me through actions, not words, that he understands respect. And if he doesn't, then I've already built a life that doesn't need him in it. That's the difference. I'm not waiting for him to fix things. I'm not holding my happiness hostage to his growth. I'm just living. And if he joins that life someday, great. If not, I shrugged. I'll still be here, watching sunsets and playing chess and proving that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. We stood there for a long moment, listening to the waves. Then Cynthia said quietly, "I'm proud of you. What you did, standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, refusing to be exploited, that took courage. It took desperation, but thank you. No, it took courage. Desperation makes people beg. Courage makes them act." I thought about that. About the moment I'd read Trey's text, telling me to disappear. About the smile that had crossed my face, not from happiness, but from recognition that the time had finally come. About every carefully planned step after that. The legal documents, the eviction notice, the withdrawn co-signing, the house sale. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been necessary. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said. "I'm not even angry anymore. I was at first. Then I was satisfied. But now, I'm just at peace. They made choices. I made choices. The consequences played out exactly as they should have. No drama, no continuing conflict. Just justice. Natural consequences. Exactly. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped protecting them from their own decisions." Cynthia kissed my cheek. "Come on, let's go to bed. Tomorrow's a new day." Tomorrow was a new day, and the day after that, and all the days stretching out ahead of me, days I could fill with whatever I chose, without navigating someone else's contempt or managing someone else's expectations. That night, I slept deeply. No anxiety, no anger, no second-guessing. Just the sound of the ocean and the knowledge that I'd done what needed doing. The next morning, I woke to find Cynthia already up, making coffee. She'd opened the windows, letting in the salt air and the sound of seagulls. My clocks ticked in the living room. 20 now, the collection growing as I found more broken pieces to restore. Each clock represented something. Patience, precision, the understanding that some things can be fixed if you're willing to put in the time and effort. Each one ran perfectly now, after months or years of careful restoration work. Unlike my relationship with Trey, which had been broken beyond my ability to fix alone, he'd have to do his own restoration work. If he did, genuinely and completely, then maybe someday we'd have something new. Not the same as before. That version was gone forever. But something honest, built on mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. Until then, I had this. A home I'd bought with money I'd earned. Friends who valued my presence, not my resources. A partner who chose me for who I was, not what I could provide. 7 rental properties generating steady income. A portfolio of investments ensuring comfortable retirement. Freedom to make plans without checking if they'd inconvenience anyone else. I had my life back. Not the life I'd expected at 68, but the life I'd earned by finally understanding my own worth. The weeks after my birthday passed smoothly. No more calls from Trey. He'd kept his word about waiting for me to reach out. No drama, no conflict, no exhausting negotiations with people who viewed my kindness as weakness. Just living, reading books on the beach, having dinner with Cynthia, maintaining my properties, adding a 21st clock to my collection, a beautiful 1940s West clocks that had been sitting silent for 30 years until I brought it back to life. One evening in late October, as the sun set over the Gulf in spectacular orange and purple, I sat on my deck and thought about justice. Real justice, not the revenge fantasy kind. Justice wasn't about punishing Trey and Rachel. It was about everyone experiencing the natural consequences of their choices. They'd chosen to exploit kindness, disrespect sacrifice, and take without giving. The consequences were financial collapse, social embarrassment, and the loss of their safety net. I'd chosen to protect myself, set boundaries, and refuse to subsidize contempt. The consequences were peace, freedom, and a life built on self-respect rather than others' approval. Both outcomes were earned. Both were fair. I pulled out my phone and looked at Trey's contact. My thumb hovered over it. Not to call, I wasn't ready for that. But I didn't delete it either. Left it there, a possibility for the future. Not a promise, not an obligation. Just acknowledgement that people could change, and if they did genuinely, relationships could potentially be rebuilt on better foundations. But that was future Ralph's decision to make. Present Ralph was too busy enjoying the life he'd reclaimed. I set down the phone and picked up my book. Cynthia brought out 2 glasses of wine. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching pelicans dive for fish and boats cruise across the darkening water. Happy? She asked. Completely. No regrets? I thought about that. Really thought about it. None. I gave Trey every chance. Years of chances. He chose to waste them. That's on him, not me. I chose to stop being a doormat. That's on me, and I'm at peace with my choice. Good. We clinked glasses. The clocks ticked inside. The waves crashed outside. Time moved forward, indifferent and unstoppable, caring nothing for regrets or wishes or if-onlys. And I moved forward with it, no longer weighed down by people who'd mistaken my generosity for weakness, my patience for fear, my kindness for obligation. I'd disappeared just like Trey had demanded, but I'd taken everything that mattered with me, my dignity, my resources, my self-respect, my future. And what I'd left behind was exactly what they'd earned. Consequences. That was justice. That was fairness. That was exactly how it should be. I smiled, raised my glass to the sunset, and felt completely, perfectly free. For the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I'd chosen myself over people who'd never chosen me. And it turned out that was the best choice I'd ever made. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.